So you guys are all Quizential users, which is awesome. So I don't have to tell you about Quizential, right? And I know I've worked with most of you, but I will give you the short intro about me. I am integrations manager at Quizential. I started out in this industry 30 years ago, call it 30 years ago, with my liberal arts degree, right? And worked as a receptionist at an environmental consulting firm in Seattle. And we did a lot of government work. And we did a lot of, this is one of my jobs as a receptionist, was to call people, ask them if they had a fax machine. So that tells you how, what the status of technology was. And I was half marketing, half accounting assistant, and I would do the new project numbers and the utilization. And I realized I was spending my weekend getting data that accounting already had about projects. And thus was born a lifelong desire to not have the duplication of effort and to focus over time as I developed systems and worked with them. My interest was really combining writing and design and logical thinking into creating a really strategic proposal that looked beautiful and spoke to people and got us interesting work that my colleagues wanted to work on. Not spending my weekend looking for project references and fixing dollar amounts in a lot of different systems. So that's the short version of my background. I did write the specs for Quizential back in the day from a marketer's perspective, right? This is what we need. This is how we need to have it organized. So I know you can tell when you're designing a system that's for accounting or not. We have limited time. I'm going to share what I was thinking about with you guys. Some of this is super basic. Some of it is stuff that has just come up as I've worked with so many firms. I'm like, you know what? It's a good point. And as we build integrations, even if you have an existing integration, these are core ideas to think about as you work with other systems, right? Or you want to bring them on, or you go to another firm and you think, wow, it's really done differently here, right? Is this a weird question to ask? Sometimes people who are new to something are the best teachers because it's new to us, right? It's not all a given and we know everything, right? And also, especially when you work with highly technical people, sometimes we don't know what's a silly question, right? We don't want to look like we don't know what we're doing, but I'm going to give you what I was thinking about talking about. And then, Jessica, I want you to share a little bit of your experience about how we changed your system to make it even more awesome. If you're comfortable doing that.
I'm comfortable.
Because,
and sorry, I took my video off. I'm eating lunch.
That's okay, right? That's why I gave you some prep so that you can, be thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna blaze through this. I like to have a takeaway, right? I feel like when I go into something, I need a takeaway. Most of you have seen this, well, and maybe you haven't seen it, right? Like if you walked into a system, you may not have seen it. Like Kraus, we did yours years ago. Same, Connie. We did your setup a long time ago, and over time we've added more systems here, right? So I am going to share my screen and I'm going to blaze through this because I want to get to questions too, because I'd like to share, Valerie. So I would like you to make me a co-host or however that needs to happen, right? Can you do that for me? I'm so not used to not being the host, right? It won't let me share. So let me know when I can share my screen. Oh, now it is. Now I have some choices. Okay, I'm going to make this guy bigger. This is a version of the questionnaire that we share. Oh, and I have another questionnaire I can share, but you guys will tell me what we can go over, right? This is the version of the questionnaire that we provide for marketing and BD folks to take to accounting to ask questions about their system, right? This is a lot of stuff that I didn't know from the get-go and why it matters. Some of you guys have bigger systems and you know what this is, and I'll try and zip across this, right? And you guys are a variety of industries too. So I'll tell you why this matters, especially if you go to a different type of firm. Multi-company financial structure. a lot of financial systems are single company, but a lot of times there's also a multi-company setup, which means there's a big database, but it's divided into separate tables. And it's divided for a couple different reasons. It's for EEO payroll requirements, or if you have like a joint venture for liability reasons, it needs to be segregated into a separate company. What happens is sometimes jobs overlap, like you have a main company and then job numbers overlap. It's important to understand if there are different subdivisions and if it matters to you and if numbers overlap and people overlap, so that you understand where's my real data that I care about for this project and why is it set up, right? This is a concept I did not understand in the beginning. This is why our next question is, if yes, do I care about it or is it just accounting purposes, right? Is our financial system hosted on-premise or in the cloud? This is confusing a lot of times, and this matters also as you guys bring on other integrations. On-premise means there's a database, it's on a machine in your office, right? The right question to ask is, where is the data housed, right? So sometimes everybody's moving to the cloud. Essential's always been in the cloud, right? But now everybody else is sort of caught up with that. I have a whole series of questions I was also shared too. The important question for you is, how is my data made available to me, right? Our integrations often just reach into the database, or not reach in, but we query the database, like Essential Reports. We query, we send the data up, we save it. Web-based, cloud-hosted systems. Cloud-hosted just means the data is not on my machine in my office. It means someone else is hosting it. The question is, how is that data made accessible to me? Through an API, which is Application Programming Interface, which is a way that that data is made accessible, credentialed via the web. We have an open API. You can get access to your data and do anything you want with it. You create your own custom program that says, like reports in Cosential, where you say, listen, these are the fields I want. Similarly, there are a bunch of programs you can customize and say, I want you to retrieve all this data, right? It's a way of making it accessible. Everybody's going to the cloud. Deltek Vision, Deltek Azure, everybody wants to go to the cloud. It's awesome for people. There's pros and cons, but it's great because IT has less overhead costs. There's a lot of flexibility. And of course, the last year has shown us anything, is that it's really important. We ask when people migrated to their current financial system, part of this is a fact-finding mission so that when you're talking to your colleagues, it's to understand things that how you know what's available to you and how reliable it is for you. So how far back does this data go, right? It's also helpful for them to understand why we need it, right? This is part of a conversation. A lot of times finance is like, well, you only need the last 5 years. Au contraire. As a marketer, right, we always say we ask for everything, and there's a couple of reasons why. One, if we're creating an integration, I want to know that I have everything. So if I can't find something, I want to know that it's because it just doesn't exist. It's not because I didn't get the number wrong, or maybe it goes by a different name, or someone else had a secret name. It removes that sort of mystery. And also, I like to do a lot of statistics. This is the fun of having the integration, is being able to say, oh, even if I can't put it in a proposal, I could look at that project and say, over the last 10 years, we've done more than 40 projects for you. Sure, 5 of them might have been tiny, but that's not the point, right? It shows a history. And it's also even tiny projects that you think wouldn't be valuable. We, at my environmental firm in Seattle, it wasn't until we had a database where we were tracking location that we realized we'd worked on the same plot of land 4 different times for different developers that had bought it. We kept ordering the the specs, what you get from the county, the details, because we didn't realize we already had them in our office because we didn't have the address. It was like, this is silly, right? We're doing the same, did a lot of wetland permitting. You can see it just allows you to make connections with the people and the projects that you've done when you go far back in time. Accounting, a lot of times they just think, oh, you wouldn't possibly need that. That's why it's so critical to have the end user involved in integrations. We ask about how new project numbers are requested because we want to understand how formalized that process is, meaning how good's this data, right? And what is the process? Has it been willy-nilly? Have you just let project managers go in and request numbers, which some firms do? We just let project managers just go in and fill in their own information. It's also, like you were talking about, Denise, this process is a great time to think about, do we want to revisit this process to make it less painful for everybody? When we arm people with this questionnaire, what we're looking for is it's an opportunity to understand how finance is organized, but also what their pain points are, right? And this is in this questionnaire here, I've listed also like asking, what is it that you wish could be better about just anything? Because you can find out surprising connections about how different parts of the organization can help each other out. I at my environmental firm, the woman who did contracts, I worked with her for a new job setup form, and she had to do, we were in King County, and she had to do tons of EEO reports, all about staff, all about people. We came up with an arrangement. I, in our database, started created forms so she could do personnel reports that were already categorized. She, in return, when people started at the firm, she entered all the data for me. So I had the education and the resume and all of that stuff. I didn't know until I asked, right? Like, how could I help you, right? So she started the chain of the personnel information. I made her life easier. We also took over the project numbering process for the same reason, because I wanted to create a database. And so what we did was we said, fine, we will do the new project. We'll set them up and we'll put them in both systems if we can control the process, right? So it's surprising when you ask people like, what causes you the most time and stress? You find surprising connections about how you can help each other out, right? You can always start with, I bet you wish I would ask you less questions, right? Accounting, I'm sure, is like delighted to, have less time, be distracted. So that's one of the reasons that we ask here about the project number process, because we want to see if there's an opening to help make the whole job setup better. This is, how is a project defined in the system? This feels like such a super basic question that it's not worth asking. This is worth asking in every single system, right? Like, what's the core type? We could go into this in detail. I won't, but there can be a project, can be correlated to a contract, can be related to jobs. It can be different at every firm and in every system. It's an important and worthwhile question to ask. Relatedly, how do you track? Do you guys do on-calls or indefinite quantity contracts? What's the relationship between task orders and those contracts? If there isn't a relationship, could there be, right? Jessica could talk about that over time. Has your project number formatting changed over time? Because we're going back historically, and that is helpful from a marketing and BD perspective. It's helpful to understand, is this numbering really different? And does that tell us something about projects we want to exclude, right? Is there a master sub relationship? This is, there can be a surprising level of nuance to how those are organized. So it's really worth having a conversation about how they are. I worked with a firm that had, that was a acquisition. 5 different firms came together and they still had 5 different heads, each of whom was responsible for a different service. And they set up a distinct project number for the same job. The project numbers were different in every system. And they wanted to know how we could link them together. The answer there was no way, but it was, you just cannot imagine the surprising things that you'll find. Some systems have billable or non-billable projects. It's worth asking, what's going to come over? There's surprising stuff hanging out in there. Key project performance fields. What's the definition of revenue, contract, gross margin, percent? These are all worthwhile questions. Like, what are the key performance metrics? How do we as a firm define them? And it's important to know that that's a basic but really important question. Same with percent complete. Every firm does this differently. There's a couple common ways of defining it. I worked with a firm that spent a year developing a custom project percent complete formula. Are there security concerns related to the integration? This actually should be up much higher in the consideration. There are, that Siri has an opinion. Looks, even Siri is getting in on the act and has an opinion about security concerns. This is, I was talking to Courtney and we were talking about, she was looking to do a personnel integration, pull over HR information, and they had gone through the whole scoping process to determine what they wanted to pull over, only to find out their corporate policy was such that none of that data could be accessible. So this is not something you want to be surprised at. I worked with another firm. We were talking about one of the things that we as the company are exploring are more options to be able to send data into a financial system to support, Connie, this a similar thing where every opportunity starts in Consensual, and we help accounting out by not only sending over a workflow notification, but maybe being able to send it to their system. There are some systems that do government work where if they had another system have automatic access, it would open up a whole auditing process. So there are processes that cannot be automated, which I didn't realize, right? It's important to really kind of ask these kind of open-ended questions to be sure that you uncover potential issues before you start integrating, and also to explore, especially with personnel, there can be options, and it's a real core need at firms to explore with everybody who's involved with onboarding of new employees. Sometimes what firms do is they create a non-confidential employee master table that reconciles so that that good core data that is not PMI, personal PIM, personal information that should not be shared, but can be accessed by a lot of different systems, and also to reconcile when there can be multiple IDs for a person. In our system, this is a thing that can be surprising. Why would a person have multiple IDs? Sometimes it's actually an EEO requirement. If someone leaves a firm and comes back, some states require that you issue them a new ID, right? Some systems have never been set up with the idea, they'll give, like if you have a multi-company structure, the same person just gets a random ID in the different systems, and they didn't realize that they needed to reconcile them. So an employee master table can be a way to reconcile all that information without having to redo a lot of systems, right? Especially when you're looking to integrate an HRIS system.
Christina, let's pause
Yeah,
for
I'm
a
gonna
second.
cut myself off.
Okay, well, it's 1:31. I want to respect everybody's time. If you need to hop off, feel free. Christina, I didn't know if you wanted to finish this out for anybody who did have extra time, or do we want to just
I'm
end it?
happy to. If you
Okay.
guys have extra time or questions, we can absolutely take questions, right? And talk about
Yeah.
stuff. Do you guys want to stay? And Jessica could tell you what we just did with their integration that they've had for a long time, but we just made it even more awesome.
We did. And I'm happy to share. So a lot of what you guys were saying at the beginning is everything we've been dealing with, currently going through, all of it. Because this is the first system my firm has ever had. So having that, entering data 5,000 times in 20 different systems, it not pulling through correct, like all of that, changing the culture, changing the way we do things. I mean, we're still in the process of doing that, and are now focused on completely changing the way we do our opportunities within the firm and trying to remove our homegrown system so it's streamlined. Just exactly everyone was talking about. But when we first got the system, the first thing we did focus on was doing the FDC connector so our proposal managers could start getting that information. So I filled out this questionnaire at the time. Again, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I trusted my accounting people. I'm like, okay, this will be great. Move this forward. And I've never done anything like this before. At my previous company, the system was already set up. So when we started getting into it and, trusting my accounting people and talking to them, we were starting to, import proposal data. So resume responsible for us, project descriptions, all that stuff. And that's when I hit a wall and I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean it's not one-to-one? Like project one doesn't align with project one here. What do you mean there's 20 numbers for it? Or that each service has a different number, or that task orders or on-call projects were stored at phase levels, which we didn't pull in, or that they had 10 different numbers. How can I tell everything we've done with these clients, or that they're under one contract? It was a mess, to be honest. It was a mess. Christina knows. But with pulling everyone in having these conversations that we had never had before as a firm, not just IT, not just accounting, not just marketing or technical staff, everyone got involved in the conversation, and we figured out amazing workarounds thanks to Christina and Frank, in how to pull out that data and have it be usable in a way that marketing uses it. So our task orders that are stored at phase levels, we now have a way to bring them in. Are what we call associated projects. So if it's different phases, design, construction, planning, or just different projects at the same site over time, we now have a way on the back end through our FDC and lots of amazing coding to pull these projects in as one. So now marketing can talk about them. Oh, at Second Avenue Subway, we did the EIS, we did design, we did this as one. And all of our staff team, all of their dates that they worked on the projects, all of our team members, costs, all of that now, because of our FDC, rolls up into one record. And we can still see the individual records and store the details of that specific service or what was done for that specific number to those ones. But now we have this nice completed record to look at everything the way marketing talks about it. So understanding the nuances of a financial system that I didn't understand before all this really helps before you go into making any connections. Did I miss anything, Christina?
That's good. And it's the other part is it solved not just a marketing
No, it
problem,
did not.
but it was financial reporting too, because
Yes.
it was like two elements of it, because if it's just a non-billable thing, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not a priority. We because you had trouble, and tell them how many work orders you had, like how many on-calls, and it's like 500.
It's an insane number. Yeah, something like that. It's insane. And that's just the ones we figured out.
Right.
But we're going through slowly and fixing those things and cleaning them up. And now when we're approaching our opportunity process, and I keep we're blowing up the whole process and changing it all. We know the problems, we know the pain points that currently exist, and are trying to work with, technical staff and everyone, accounting, IT. So it's streamlined. So we don't have to clean up. Like I keep saying to my firm, I don't mind cleaning up the last 40 years. I'm not trying to clean up the next 40 years. Like it needs to be easier, and it needs to be from the onset, not, 5 years after the project's done and we're trying to figure it out.
Sometimes I feel like people haven't even thought through until we bring it up, like how critical it is.
It
right?
absolutely is so critical, because we're the beginning and the end users. So when you think of it that way, it has to be set up for everybody. Yes, everyone needs value from it, but it has to be set up in a way that it's not messy when you're trying to rush that last minute thing out, when you're trying to pull out those details to strategize and win a pursuit. And it just needs to be simple. And it wasn't for us.
And you and Jessica ended up doing beautiful graphics that show their on-call work and the relationships, and that's a way of helping bring that home. Like, this is what we're able to do with this data. This is what this means, right? Like, not only do we save time and money, but we have better proposal, but here's what we can do with it. And that feedback loop is really important. And
Yeah.
when I was at my firm, I worked for a CFO, and she said, I'll give you any support you want on your database as long as you get me a good sales report. And I was like, great. And then she took all of her operations people, put them together and said, you will work together and you will, and she had everybody talk about their part of the customer journey and their pain points. And that really opened it up for us to really be able to understand, oh, that's what you're struggling with. I have that. That's
Yep.
easy for me. I can do that. And it was that champion, right? And then really understanding stuff. And I thought a lot of this was so basic, like you and I have talked about, Jessica. Like, a project is a project. Like, how complicated could it be?
It is not.
Really, it can be complicated. The other thing that we did at my firm, it took me a year to have us redo our numbering system. We did huge on-calls for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and I used to spend my weekends figuring out which task order was related. And it took me a year, but we changed our numbering system so that the main project was the root number, and then it was 01, 02, so you could look at a number and know the contract it was related to and how many total you had done. It took me a year, but it was the best thing that I ever battled for, right?
It's
And I
so
think,
true.
like Denise, you were talking about, it's really helpful to be able to ask questions about people like, well, we have done it, but what do we get out of it? Like, people get really committed to a numbering system, and there's a lot of logic freighted in there because they haven't had a database. So their project number has been a database, or it's just they have a lot of logic around it, but it's not giving value, and it's in fact costing you money. Like, we figured out at my firm, we had 3 numbers: an opportunity number, a proposal number, and a project number. And I did an analysis, which was, I just did kind of, napkin analysis of how much money we spent trying to reconcile information, and took it to my leadership and said, okay, do you want to spend $75,000 a year on just reconciling different numbers? Because we can, but here's an even better way, right? And that's what it took for them. They were like, sounds great. We're done with this numbering system. And I think for all of this change, when you put numbers to it, it really helps. Do you guys have questions about anything that you're looking to do? Do you have questions or?
So, Christina, when we
Yes.
talked, I think, was it November or December? I can't remember exactly. Your team was asking us about being on the BST8 and why we're still on it. We are moving to 10. So I'd really be interested in learning, are there things that we could be doing differently now that we have the newer version of BST 10, on ways we can integrate with CoCentral, limitations with the BST8?
Yeah, we could. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, just not to get specific, but we'll get specific. We do have a new integration that works with 10 that might work for you guys, depending on how custom you are. And it has it's more real time, has some expanded options for companies, contacts, and personnel that you guys might like. So we should definitely talk about it. And you're looking to do the SQL connector too, right?
Yeah, we're going to get the SQL connector up and running hopefully in the next couple of months. BST 10, I think they're starting to work on that this year, so it might be it's going to be a long project. So we might be a year and a half out.
Yeah, it's a while for ERP. Like, it is a while. If you guys don't know this, it took me a while to understand what the SQL connection is, and I'll share that with you. And that is because we're cloud hosted, the SQL connector is an optional product that replicates your data real time into a SQL database that you can have on premise. So it copies that data there, so you can use that data as a data source, right? You could do Power BI reporting, so it's easy to kind of have access to all your data. If you want to do SQL stuff with it, you could. There are firms that also use that as a trigger point, right? So they've created an integration that says, okay, when an opportunity moves stages, then go create a new project in my system. So it gives a lot of flexibility to create some custom integrations, especially with a lot of times you'll have in-house staff that really know SQL and are comfortable with it. So it's really something they can sort of get their hands on, as opposed to API programming, which is also, there are a lot more people that can do API programs, and there's a lot of fun and flexibility, but the replication is just more direct, and it's nice to have it as a data source for Tableau or Power BI, and you can do some elaborate reporting with it. So it's really, it'll be good.
So the SQL connector does work with Power BI?
Yes, because it's just a SQL database, right? I mean, it's real-time updating with your consensual data, which is awesome. So it's like really up to the moment. Not that, I mean, of course we want to have the most updated data, but you know, it's not like stock prices, right? But it's great to have. So it's kind of awesome. And it's really designed obviously for opportunity reporting. That's its core kind of record type. The data connector has projects as the record type, and the SQL connector has opportunities as its, but there's lots of data in there, reports. Like, you know, it's a lot of good stuff in there. It'll be fun.
I have another question if everybody doesn't mind. And this might not be your area, Christina. I don't know if you're strictly with the FDC and SQL, but I remember last year y'all talking about open asset integration.
Oh yeah, we're still working on that. Yes, we are. That's still on our roadmap. I don't have a status, but it is something that we are really exploring. Do the rest of you guys use open asset? What are you using for digital asset management?
Christina, I have been working with Open Asset, and I've been talking with people at Open Asset, and the person that I was dealing with was under the assumption that we were going to be taking information from CoSential about the project and put it into Open Asset. And I said, no. I want the pictures in Open Asset to go into CoSential, not the other way around. Did I misunderstand something?
I'm gonna tell you the truth, which is I have not been involved in that. So I don't know which way we're envisioning the integration going with that.
Because we want CoSential to be our project and our proposal and project repository. And we only want Open Asset to be the photo repository, so that when we need a photo from a project, we can easily just click a button and look at all the photos and choose one, maybe the two best ones, and use it for response to requests for proposals.
We had always designed CoSential. Our intention originally was that we were the repository for the best photos that were cleared for use and that were the best looking. So a small subset of photos, not every muddy field, not every iteration, because as you know, there's a whole series of releases and the whole thing. And we found that in CoSential, we sort of honored it's the small subset, right? Denise and Connie, I can get more information about where we are with that integration and follow up with you for sure.
That would be
so
very
my memory
helpful.
I don't know if my memory's right, because it was last year when they talked about it, but my memory was what Denise or whoever you spoke with had said, where CoSential was going to push information into Open Asset, was my memory. I'll tell you, I've been talking to Julie Schaefer. She's been helping us with publisher templates. And she said that there's actually, if you use InDesign, there's some integration that you can do with Open Asset, and you use CoSential, so you'd be kind of having both of them work together to create your proposals. I'm not a marketer. I don't know InDesign, so I don't know anything about that. So I would have to trust Julie when she says that, but I'll just share that information.
That sounds awesome. Cool. All right. I know we're a little bit.
Christina, somebody asked if you would be willing to share that integration document.
Oh yeah, of course I will. Yes.
Okay.
I have this guy here, right? Which is this guy, which is this sort of generic version. And then I have this, which is a document that I created for us internally, but it's just the overall guideline of integration, just questions to ask. So as you guys think about like different programs, different stuff you want to use. Like these are the basic questions we ask about, like, can it be integrated? So as you think about it, right? It's just good to have that in your back pocket. Because there's so many different programs, so many different things, it's important to understand, like, what do I need to know about this to know if it's even going to be helpful to me, and I can put it in my world of
That's great.
integrations.
This is a great resource. Thank you for sharing this with us on the call, or, you know, sharing
Pleasure.
the content. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I will distribute this from Christina. Once you can share it with me, I'll be happy to share it with the attendees on the call today. Thank you all so much for your time. Sorry we went over a little bit, but we really appreciate you sharing so much on this topic, Christina. Thank you for your time as well and being committed to staying on a little bit past.
It's
So
my pleasure.
all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll be sure to get you this document shortly.